This Ferguson case holds a distinct place in our history. This story is difficult to tell for more than one reason. First, because at the center of it is a woman who did not deserve what happened to her. There is a particular kind of grief and outrage that settles over a community when someone vulnerable is victimized, especially in a place where people are accustomed to feeling safe. And perhaps that is one reason this story has always felt so close to home. I grew up within walking distance of where it happened. My grandfather was a town marshal in Ferguson during a time in the late 60s and early 70s. Later, my uncle served as Ferguson's police chief throughout my teenage years after retiring from the Somerset Police Department as assistant chief. From the small world view and humble little home I knew then, Ferguson felt like one of the safest places on earth. For people who knew Ferguson, Kentucky, this was not some distant crime in a place nobody recognized. It happened in familiar streets, among familiar families, in a community where people expected home to mean safety. And when violence enters a place that people have always thought of as safe, the question is not only what happened, it is also how could it happen. Even today, we are asking those same questions. This was a neighborhood, a small town, a place where people knew each other, checked on each other, shared meals, left doors unlocked, and noticed when something was not right. In September of 1947, Somerset and Ferguson were moving through ordinary small-town life. The Somerset City Council was talking about a new city water system. The VFW was planning a donkey ball game. New businesses and law offices were being opened. Typhoid cases were being reported in the county. And then, in the middle of all of that, a 55-year-old widow in Ferguson was brutally attacked at her home. For this story, we are going to call her Mrs. Ada. This case matters for several reasons. It was tragic. It was violent. It shook the community. And from the records I could find, it appears to be the last case connected to Pulaski County that ended with a person being executed by Kentucky's electric chair. But before we talk about the punishment, we need to talk about the woman. To understand why this case hit so hard, we need to understand Ferguson as it was in the 1940s. Ferguson had once been a busy railroad town. The Ferguson shops brought rail workers, mechanics, travelers, and all kinds of movement through the area. At times, it had the rough reputation that could follow a railroad town. But by 1947, things had changed. The shops were still operating, but not at the level they once had. The town had settled into something quieter. By 1950, Ferguson had around 550 people living within its boundaries. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew one another. People checked in, they visited, they shared garden goods. And when something unusual happened, somebody noticed. That is part of what makes what happened to Mrs. Ada so heartbreaking. Mrs. Ada was born in Wayne County around 1892. She later made her home in Ferguson and lived on Wattle Street. By 1947, she was a widow. She had adult children and family connections, but she was also part of the life of the community. She attended High Street Baptist Church faithfully. One newspaper account described her as someone who went out of her way to help the sick and needy. That is the part we don't want to get lost. Mrs. Ada was not just a name in an old newspaper column. She was a neighbor. She was a mother. She was a church-going woman. She was remembered as kind and loving. And on Sunday, September 14th, 1947, something terrible happened at her home. If you have lived through September in southern Kentucky, you know it is not quite summer and not quite fall. The days can still sit heavy in the 80s or 90s. By mid-September, the last of the lightning bugs have usually finished their show. Most of them wrap it up by late July, but on the rare occasion, you might catch one or two blinking in the distance. The nights begin to cool just enough to notice. The crickets take over the dark. Fog settles in the low places. And if you sit outside, you might hear the deep rumbling call of a bullfrog. These night sounds are normal and comforting. It's when the night goes still that makes us unconsciously uneasy. And on this particular night, sometime between 10 and 10:30, something was off when Mrs. Ada's son and his wife came home to the Wattle Street house. The lights were on. The back screen door was unlocked. Mrs. Ada was not inside. At first, he may have hoped there was a simple explanation. It was not unusual for Mrs. Ada to visit neighbors, so he went to check. No one had seen her. Two neighbors, Pat Beasley and Sturley Phelps, became concerned and joined her son in the search. They returned to Mrs. Ada's home and began looking around the yard with a flashlight. Soon, They found her purse about 30 feet from the back door. It was empty. At that point, this no longer looked like a misunderstanding. Mrs. Ada's son told his wife to call the police. Then, about 145 feet from the back door, near an alleyway by the fence, the flashlight caught something. It was Mrs. Ada. She had been badly beaten, violated, and was barely alive. The men carried her gently back into the house. Police arrived, secured the scene, and began collecting evidence. Mrs. Ada's injuries were severe, and she was taken to Somerset Hospital. Police moved quickly. Chief Norfleet was called to the scene. They documented the yard, collected evidence, and interviewed people. One neighbor recalled hearing muffled groans earlier that evening. Investigators began looking for suspects immediately. Several men were brought in for questioning. Then, police went to the home of Luther Williams on White Street. When officers arrived, Luther was wearing a clean white shirt. His sister told officers he had been burning another shirt shortly before. In the cook stove, they found shirt buttons. At first, Luther denied being involved, but around 3 o'clock in the morning, only hours after the attack, he gave a confession. He admitted going to the home with a rifle and forcing her outside. The amount taken was $8. $8. That detail is hard to sit with. A woman's life was taken, a family was shattered, and a community sent into mourning and outrage, all tied to a robbery of $8. Mrs. Ada died less than 24 hours after the attack. After that, the case went from an unspeakable, heinous assault to a murder case. And in 1947, Pulaski County, the punishment being discussed was death. Emotions in the community were high. By the time Luther was being held at the courthouse jail in Somerset, roughly 200 people had gathered outside. Authorities were concerned, all demanding swift justice for a brutal and senseless crime. In response to the crowd, authorities moved him out of the county for safekeeping. If you have been here and watching long enough, then you know how volatile these situations can be. It is said that is why Chief Norfleet and Sheriff Frank Beatty made arrangements and transported Luther to Lexington. 2 FBI agents reportedly followed for added security. Luther was charged with willful murder and rape. Because of the public outrage, a jury from Mercer County was brought in. The trial began in October 1947. The courthouse was tightly controlled. The Commonwealth presented many witnesses. Neighbors saw Luther with a rifle. Evidence sent to the FBI laboratory showed that blood and hair found on the rifle belonged to Mrs. Ada. The defense did not present testimony. The jury deliberated for only minutes. Luther Williams was found guilty, and his punishment was fixed at death. He flinched slightly when the verdict was read. In December 1947, the Court of Appeals upheld the verdict. The execution was scheduled for February 27, 1948, at Eddyville State Penitentiary, just over 5 months from the crime. This is where the story becomes significant. As mentioned at the beginning, it appears to be the last case tied to Pulaski County where the sentence ended in execution by electric chair. That is a significant marker in history worth noting. In response to the conviction, final judgment, order of punishment and warrant of execution, Luther Williams was executed at Eddyville on February 27, 1948, just after midnight. And only 2 weeks before, his father died of a heart attack at his home in Somerset. By the end of it, 2 families had been devastated. Mrs. Ada's family lost a beloved mother and neighbor. Luther's family lost a son to an unforgivable crime and the machinery of the state. None of that softens what happened to Mrs. Ada. But it does remind us that cases like this create many circles of grief. I want this story to end with Mrs. Ada, a woman who lived in Ferguson, a woman whose neighbors went looking for her because they knew something was wrong, a woman remembered for helping the sick and needy. Her life should not be reduced to that final night. That is the part of local history that is most important. Not just that Pulaski County had a last execution case, but that before there was a trial, there was a woman whose life was stolen from her. Her name, her kindness, and her place in this community deserve to be remembered. In September 1947, Ferguson was a small town moving through ordinary life. Everyone assumed tomorrow would come. But for Mrs. Ada, tomorrow did not come. And for Pulaski County, this marked the end of an era, the last local case that ended with execution by electric chair. Remember the victim. Remember the history. Handle both with care. For the extended account and resources, check out Hometown Murders and Mysteries, Pulaski County, Kentucky, Volume 1. For more details and discussion about this case and others, find us on Facebook at Lake Cumberland Tactical Innovations and join our subscriber group for even more details and discussion. Or you can follow us on YouTube and TikTok at Somerset Sleuths 25. Follow along for more and like and share to help keep local history alive. As always, thanks for watching.